Tonight on CFTK-TV News, Prince Rupert is looking for help for displaced Sherbrooke residents. Canadian premiers are trying to work through issues with the U.S. government, and several other Canadian politicians are looking to assist in that similar endeavor.
Northwest BC's only television news team. We are CFTK-TV News.
Good evening, I'm Cale Maslin, and here's what's making the news in the Northwest and beyond for today. After the Sherbrooke apartments in Prince Rupert caught on fire and displaced about 100 residents, the city has now put out a call for community support on their Facebook page. As of yesterday, there are still 19 units and approximately 60 residents that have been impacted by the fire and are looking for other accommodations. The city is asking for any potential residents with available housing to consider renting to those displaced and to reach out to the North Coast Transition Society's Housing Outreach Program at 250-627-8959. The Houston and District Chamber of Commerce recently announced that they will be accepting nominations for their upcoming Community Excellence Awards ceremony on February 8th. Anyone who wants to make a nomination for any of the 8 awards being given out can do so online via the Chamber of Commerce's website or by picking up a physical nomination form from the Chamber itself. The deadline to submit nominations is January 22nd, and all nominees must finish a questionnaire 2 days later by January 24th. As the federal government is facing a lot of instability during a critical time in politics, more than a few politicians are in the midst of addressing concerns about threats south of the border. Here's Jaylene Matthews with more information.
I know it's a time of great uncertainty, and that creates anxiety.
In the wake of the prorogued parliament, along with threats south of the border, Canadians are facing a difficult political climate. Conservative federal candidate for Skeena-Bulkley Valley, Ellis Ross, says that Canada can't afford to be taking the states lightly.
We had this great relationship with the United States for decades, but now there's back and forth animosity, and it's really between the leaders, between Canada and the United States. I think the first thing that any new prime minister's got to do is start to mend those relationships for the betterment of North America.
Forest Minister Ravi Parmar, who was in Terrace this week, says his ministry will have a plan for Trump's tariff threats.
Next couple of weeks, I'll be announcing kind of a Team BC approach to making sure that we're fighting for BC's interests on softwood lumber duties. And this really important topic. The Premier is leading the work on the Trump tariffs, but we know that even prior to the discussion on the infamous tweet that led to this barrage of comments back and forth around what a 25% tariff would look like, we already know that softwood lumber duties are going up considerably in 2025, which is going to be challenging for our industry and our sector here in British Columbia.
Parmar says it's important to hold the federal government accountable in supporting BC's forestry industry.
British Columbia has delivered not only for itself but for Canada as a place where people can create good paying jobs in forestry, and we need the federal government now more than ever to step up. They have not been stepping up. In the past, we've seen the federal government spend billions of dollars on battery plants in Ontario and hundreds of millions, if not billions, on other initiatives in Quebec and Alberta. And we are not seeing the same love here in BC. And it's time that they step up and help support this very important sector. And I'm looking forward to working as part of a Team BC initiative that holds those folks accountable.
And Premier Eby says his government will warn our southern neighbors that those threatened tariffs would greatly affect Americans.
Make our case to decision makers in the United States that the proposed tariffs from the president-elect will mean a significant increase in prices for Americans around things like homes.
For CFTK-TV News in Terrace, I'm Jaylene Matthews.
With Justin Trudeau resigning in the middle of a tumultuous time with the U.S., the premiers are stepping up their game to tackle Donald Trump's tariff threats. They're booking flights to Washington on a campaign to educate American politicians on what a disaster tariffs would be for both sides of the border. CTV's Rob Buffum reports.
Canada's premiers met virtually today, hashing out a plan to respond to President-elect Trump's tariff threats and agreeing to go to Washington, D.C. on a trade mission February 12th.
I think this is a healthy sign to see premiers stepping up. It's clearly an existential threat and an economic threat.
Premier Eby has already spoken with the governors for Washington State, Colorado, and Oregon, and in a statement he says, "I've asked for their assistance in ensuring Americans are fully aware of the additional costs they will be facing." Eby adding, while meeting leaders in Washington State next month, the premiers will outline the retaliation measures we're willing to take and the devastating impacts of these tariffs on both sides of the border. The looming economic threats as Trump continues his taunting calls to acquire Canada, posting these images on social media after saying Tuesday he'd like to use economic force to annex Canada.
Canada so far has been effectively saying, yes, we agree to do your homework for you. And as in any bullying relationship, when you give in to the request, you just invite more bullying.
With the Prime Minister soon resigning and Parliament prorogued, the premiers, notably Ontario's Doug Ford, are taking an active leadership role.
There is a vacuum now in Ottawa and a real concern of, without any real focus and leadership with the federal government on an international trade relationship.
Ford appearing on American news networks, campaigning for Canada, pushing back on annexation and tariff talk.
President-elect Trump is a real estate tycoon. He's made billions, but that property's not for sale. As simple as that.
The premiers are reconvening 1 week from today along with the Prime Minister to revisit strategy to combat Trump's tariff threats.
Coming up next, BC Emergency Health Services, being deep in the red money-wise, is gaining the attention of healthcare administrators. Welcome back. An investigation into sex trafficking has made its way into Cambodia. That's where a now-retired BC RCMP officer has spent decades helping victims fleeing what he calls modern-day slavery. Brian McConaughey's mission of hope was triggered while working to put two notorious BC pedophiles in prison for preying on children in Southeast Asia. CTV's Michelle Bernoro has the latest.
In the bustling Cambodian capital, Phnom Penh, filled with street markets and tuk-tuks, and where gaps between poverty and wealth stand in sharp contrast, a side road brings you to a building with a very Canadian connection.
This is an environment that is safe for them.
This is Radanak International, founded by Delta's Brian McConaughey.
Sign in here for security.
It's a refuge for traumatized women and teens who've just escaped a life of sex slavery.
They escape by jumping from moving cars, pretending to be ill, so they're taken to hospital. We've had one swim through the sewers of, I think it was Beijing. How bad does it have to be before you'll climb down into sewers with no expectation of even surviving?
McConaughey's humanitarian work in Cambodia began decades ago. While with the RCMP, he helped jail a sex predator from Vancouver.
Donald Baker was the first file of a Canadian coming to abuse children in Cambodia.
Later, police discovered another BC man abusing children in Cambodia, Christopher Neal.
He would post his pictures of abuse and swirl his face so he couldn't be identified. It wasn't hard to unswirl him, and he was tracked and identified.
Though retired, McConaughey assisted Mounties in finding the building where Neal's crimes were committed. However, getting search warrants was tricky, so McConaughey bought the building instead.
Now that I owned the crime scene, I didn't need warrants to examine the building, and so it was ours. And so we actually processed the whole crime scene, went to court, led to conviction.
But McConaughey knew much more work had to be done to help victims of exploitation.
Innocent young country girls. They're swept up by this. The traffickers masquerading as job skills, brokerage companies, we'll get them passports, we'll get them their airline tickets, we'll ship them off. But in accepting the airline ticket and the visas and the passport, they don't realize they're becoming indebted.
He says they are most often sent to China. His organization has worked with the Cambodian government to create protocols for the return of undocumented Cambodians.
We had another girl who was imprisoned in an apartment for years to be sexually abused, and she exited that apartment through an 8-story window and survived by ripping up curtains and making herself a rope.
Some of the trafficking victims have been out of Cambodia for years. Radanak not only gives them trauma counseling and skills training, but also gives them hope.
This woman, who we are not identifying, is one of hundreds of survivors Radanak has helped. With a support worker as her translator, she told CTV her impoverished family forced her to go to China and marry a man she had never met.
Husband that has used violence with her.
She says the trafficker took her passport and ID and she had no way out.
She felt a lot of anxiety and like has depression and worries a lot, just thinking about she has no document, so police can catch her anytime.
After being trapped for years, she escaped, only to be jailed until the Cambodian embassy intervened and she was returned home. In addition to counseling, Radanak sponsored training so she could become a tailor. It's a job she loves, and it's given her a new life. Radanak now employs about 80 people at its center in Phnom Penh, supported by Canadian donors. And at the heart of it all is McConaughey.
It's exhausting, but after 35 years, when I see lives given freedom, it just keeps me going.
And keeps him focused on his mission of hope for those robbed of so much. Michelle Bernoro, CTV News, in Phnom Penh, Cambodia.
Healthcare administrators are cracking down on overtime for paramedics as BC Emergency Health Services is millions of dollars in the red. The union is warning ambulances are sitting empty and patients could end up waiting even longer for care. As Penny Daflos reports, the organization is now on the defensive.
This is the sound you want to hear when lives are on the line. But in recent years, burnout and a shortage of qualified paramedics have meant long waits.
Waiting and waiting and waiting for an ambulance to show up that didn't.
Now sources tell CTV News BC Emergency Health Services is way over budget and cracking down on overtime for paramedics.
They've made several changes to how they're filling open ambulance spots, and that's leading to a lot of ambulances sitting empty province-wide.
There are 184 ambulance stations in BC, and with rural ER closures now commonplace, Lower Mainland paramedics have been working on their days off in those communities. Since January 1st, the union says BC EHS is leaving shifts unfilled until the last minute.
We constantly operate needing overtime staff and people stepping up to fill those ambulances. So there's a lot of predictable scheduling stuff that they could do 6 weeks, a month in advance.
BC EHS tells CTV News overtime is not an efficient way to meet our staffing needs, but overtime hours continue to be available. The organization says it will prioritize the most critical calls, but patients aren't always easily diagnosed.
The real issue is those non-life-threatening calls where we're going to see longer waits. And we know from history that people that are, still serious, if they wait for hours, they will become life-threatening.
And now we take a look at both your nightly and weekly weather forecast. In tonight's forecast, the North Coast should see a chance of showers plus a low of 6 degrees. The Terrace-Kitimat area is set to deal with a chance of showers as well, with their low sitting at 2 degrees. And the Bulkley Valley and Lakes District will be home to rain with a low at -6 degrees. Transitioning over to the weekly forecast, the North Coast should get plenty of rain while their high moves from 5 to 8 degrees. In the Terrace-Kitimat area, their upcoming week will consist of possibly a little sun, but mostly rain, snow, and flurries, while the high shifts from 4 to 2 degrees. And in the Bulkley Valley and Lakes District, the week for them should get some sun to start, before becoming solely cloudy with flurries, and the high will bounce between 3 and -1 degree. Checking out the highways now, visit Drive BC for the latest and up-to-date conditions, and as always, drive safe out there. On Highway 16, there is slippery sections, utility work, limited visibility, strong crosswinds, bridge maintenance, a vehicle recovery, road maintenance work, shoulder maintenance, and the Usk Ferry has been shut down for the season with the cable car now in effect. Highway 35 has slippery sections, and Highway 118 has some slippery sections too. Highway 37 has some slippery sections, compact snow, and other winter driving conditions. Highway 37A has compact snow, some more slippery sections on the Nishka Highway, and the Telegraph Creek Road has slippery sections as well. And this is what the roads were looking like this afternoon around the region from the view of the province's highway cams. Still to come is an update on the horrific fires taking place in Los Angeles. Welcome back. Over to devastation in California, where 4 large wildfires forced tens of thousands of people from their homes. At least 5 people have died in the Los Angeles area, and hundreds of buildings have already burned to the ground. Crews are fighting not only flames, but 100-kilometer-per-hour winds in a region that hasn't seen rain in months. CTV's Andrew Johnson has the latest.
The terrifying view from inside a home surrounded by fire. The flames fueled by hurricane-force winds, consuming 5 football fields per minute in the Los Angeles area, a region that hasn't seen rain in hundreds of days.
This year we knew with zero rain that one big windstorm and we were toast, and last night it happened.
More than 1,000 structures have been destroyed, despite the best efforts of hundreds of firefighters.
This is a tragic time in our history here in Los Angeles, but a time where we're really tested and see who we really are.
At least 70,000 people have been ordered to evacuate in the face of at least 4 fires, Hollywood stars among them.
I haven't seen anything like this in my entire life, and I don't think many people have.
In the race to get to safety, people began abandoning their cars, which then blocked the evacuation route. The vehicles had to be bulldozed out of the way. Some residents stayed behind, risking their lives to save homes in their neighborhoods, taking on a wall of fire armed only with hoses.
I've watched shows where you see all these burned houses and then one standing out that didn't get burned, and you wonder how. Well, I think our neighbors helped us, our higher power.
Caught in the chaos, Canadian expat Carolyn Day and her family, who are now holed up in an Airbnb. Their home west of LA is still standing. Much is not.
I watched my son's high school burn down live on TV with him, and all the businesses we know, where we were married, our local beach, the lifeguard tower, everything's gone.
They don't know where they'll sleep tomorrow. Friends in Nova Scotia and on Vancouver Island have offered places to stay back home.
The comfort is that we're together as a family, and the cat and the dog are with us. So even if our community burns down or our house burns down, we're together.
One family among thousands, just thankful to be safe. Andrew Johnson, CTV News.
A month after he was nearly killed by a stray bullet, a former Vancouver Whitecaps youth soccer star is telling his story for the first time. Nathan Demian credits family and faith for his remarkable recovery, and as CTV Shannon Patterson reports, he's determined to step back onto the soccer pitch later this year.
On December 7th, Nathan Demian was out celebrating an Ohio State victory that propelled his top-ranked Buckeyes to soccer's Final Four when 2 passing cars exchanged gunfire and he was hit by a stray bullet.
It went through my abdomen and then transferred kind of through my whole body and then kind of ended up in my left side.
The 22-year-old, who got his start with the Vancouver Whitecaps youth program and represented Canada internationally before signing with Ohio State, was conscious and able to walk to the ambulance. He had no idea he'd suffered extensive internal injuries.
I thought I was going to go play on Friday. I thought they were just going to take the bullet out. I thought I'd be fully back.
He almost died on the operating table with how much blood loss there was. And then similarly, again, in contrast to how severe the injury was, the recovery has been nothing short of a miracle to witness.
Originally told he'd likely need a feeding tube and ostomy bag for life, Demian was well enough to be discharged from hospital just in time to spend the holidays with family in Langley.
I could cry tears of joy right now, just what that felt like to have him home and for him to be alive and well.
Once I got out of hospital, every single day was like a huge jump, a huge jump, a huge jump, a huge jump. So I can't be more thankful and grateful for how my recovery is going. It's still a long process ahead, and I still have another surgery.
Demian has returned to Columbus to prepare for that surgery. While he's disappointed he missed the Buckeyes' Final Four appearance.
Once I kind of knew that I probably should have died, I had a little bit more appreciation for just kind of being alive and kind of the miracle that it happened.
And he's eager to start training with his team again.
I would love to be back for the beginning of the year, and that's my goal. And talking to the doctors, that's a realistic goal.
He continues to make strides that we couldn't have imagined. So we just continue to kind of not squash dreams, but actually just flow with them.
Regardless of whether he can return to the pitch for his final season in August.
So the fact that I'm here and the fact that I'm still alive and have a second chance at life is something that I definitely don't want to take for granted and don't want to waste, and really kind of want to try to put my best foot forward and be successful and make people's lives better in whatever I can do.
Shannon Patterson, CTV News.
And now we turn our attention to how the stock markets are looking as of today compared to yesterday. The Canadian dollar is down to 1/100 of a cent, the price of gold is up $18.40, oil is up 60 cents, natural gas is up 5 cents, aluminum is down $10. In Toronto, the TSX is up 21.68 points, the Venture Index is up 4.95. In New York, the Dow Jones remained the same, and NASDAQ also remains the same. Still ahead, a basketball team is sitting out a game to protest the treatment of one of their players. Welcome back. A few months ago, a transgender BC college basketball player spoke out on being targeted verbally and physically by an opposing team. Now she and her team are sitting out its next few games in protest, hoping the league takes action. CTV's Kevin Chirac reports.
Vancouver Island University's Harriet McKenzie is a former National Player of the Year and is transgender.
McKenzie driving, gets it!
After a game in late October against Columbia Bible College, McKenzie spoke out on social media.
The opposing team's head coach, Taylor Claggett, cornered one of our athletic staff and went on a tirade about how I shouldn't be allowed to play.
CBC head coach Claggett didn't respond to our request for comment, but the school confirmed she spoke with VIU staff, expressing her concerns for the safety of the female athletes on the CBC women's basketball team. The next game on the next day, McKenzie was taken down with a flagrant foul, claiming it was a deliberate attempt to injure. CBC called the accusation untrue. McKenzie filed a complaint against Claggett, and Pac West, BC's college sports governing body, said it was investigating but has yet to take any action. With the two schools set to play again this weekend at CBC campus, the entire Mariners team sent a letter to Pac West saying they're sitting out. It reads in part, "We don't feel safe playing at CBC or with that team so long as Coach Claggett is still free to behave the way she did." A spokesperson for CBC told CTV News, "This was surprising news to us as we had been in ongoing positive conversations involving Pac West and VIU to develop an event safety plan for these specific games. Accusations that CBC, its coaches, players, and fans are a safety threat are simply untrue and misinformed." Most provinces do not restrict trans athletes. However, new rules in Alberta state male-born trans athletes must compete in the male category. In the video, McKenzie says she started her transition in kindergarten and has testosterone levels 1/10 of the average female. Pac West told CTV News the investigation's ongoing, but didn't say whether VIU will be penalized for sitting out this weekend's games. Kevin Chirac, CTV News.
An industry group says a large majority of BC's construction contractors are reporting a shortage of skilled workers. The Independent Contractors and Businesses Association says its 2025 survey shows 72% of respondents reported being affected by a lack of skilled tradespeople. The labor shortage is happening simultaneously as demand is spiking, with almost 50% of respondents saying work volumes are expected to rise this year. Association President Chris Gardner is urging government to fast-track training programs as well as align immigration policies to address the shortage. That is all of our news for now. From everyone at CFTK-TV News, I'm Cale Maslin, and thank you for watching.